I guess we are live. I just like to wait to see us there, but probably people will see us from now.
Mhm.
Here we go. We are live. So,
Mhm.
hello, guys. How are you? I'm very grateful today to have my guest, Patrice Davis. Thank you so much, Patrice, for joining us today. We're going to be talking about government grants. That's her power house. So I'm going to let Patrice introduce herself. Hi,
Mhm.
Patrice.
Hi, how are you doing, Nora? Thank you so much. My name is Patrice Davis, everyone. I'm the owner of GrantsWorks Consulting. We're a consulting company that specializes in government grants, so that's federal, state, and local grants. We also, of course, help our clients that are interested primarily in foundation grants. So grants is our space, and I'm happy to tell you more about our company as we get into the discussion and provide some details about our services and other resources that we have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And guys, make sure you put your questions in the comments, and we'll make sure to answer the question as much as we can during this time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Patrice, so let us know what's your company, what is it about, who do you help?
Absolutely. So GrantsWorks, we are a grant consulting company. So we provide services on the entire life cycle of a grant. We help nonprofit organizations and we help businesses and, basically find, apply for, manage, and comply with grants, again, specifically government grants. Services include, conducting research to make sure our clients understand the funding landscape. If they decide they want to apply for, a government grant, we do the grant writing and provide all of the technical assistance to make sure that they can submit on time with all the documents and all the T's crossed and I's dotted. And then on the post-award side, we manage grants for our clients. We do compliance assessments to make sure clients are ready for their audits, their single audits specifically. And we also do federal grants management training. That's actually our sweet spot. We developed training that, a federally funded training that teaches folks everything about federal grants from the basics all the way to closeout. And we like to call it, and it is recipient-centered training. For those of you out there that have federal grants, who have worked on federal grants, sometimes the training that the agencies offer may be very agency specific. Well, we provided and developed training for the CDC that is recipient centered. So based on what you need in a sequence that helps you.
Awesome. So when do you think, based on your experience, people they can say, okay, now we probably can go and seek government grants?
Yeah, great question. So I used to say that an organization shouldn't pursue a government grant unless they've had, 2 to 3 years of experience providing service in a specific area or whatever it is they plan on applying for. However, one of the things I think it's really important for organizational leaders to be aware of is that you can actually apply as a sub-recipient. What does that mean? That means that your organization isn't quite ready to submit a proposal for your organization to receive the funding, but you may already have a partnership with another organization that is seeking funding that may be more government grant ready. And because you all already have a partnership, you can, basically join the application as a sub-awardee. Sub-recipient basically means the same thing. I mean, that's a great way to start receiving, government grants. But not as the primary recipient, but as a sub-recipient. But you still need to, of course, be able to supplement and be able to get the work done. So you need to have at least that capacity in place so that the primary recipient can depend on you to help supplement that program.
Yeah, actually, I noticed, speaking to a lot of people in nonprofit, they they really want to rush and go apply for grant, like as soon as they get 501c3, and they want to run and get the grants, and that doesn't work. I try to tell them that, so that I developed actually a program just for that, like, okay, get ready, like in this, like you said, 2 to 3 years, they need to really build their capacity and have themselves ready, like their book is good, like build the capacity in the term of team building, doing the programs they're saying they can serve, so the funder can fund them. But a lot of people still intimidated of government grants. When you see government grants, like they might go and they go to corporations, foundation grant, they're very intimidated, like on going to get government grants. What would you say for these people after they build their capacity and do everything? Like, should they be intimidated?
They shouldn't be intimidated. Here's what's, so there are a couple of things to consider. I do want to briefly piggyback on what you said. So in addition to having, 2 to 3 years of experience for any grant, not just a government grant, you want to be able to have a system in place that collects data. That's important. Data is money, so have a system. It doesn't have to be the most sophisticated system, but if you serve 300 people, for example, you should have a system that says, yes, you can run a report saying I serve 300 people. Here's the gender breakdown. Here's the age group. So just details that are going to be important. So, somehow capture that data is really, really important. Then also, as Nora can attest to, having a good financial system in place. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you definitely need to be working towards that. So by the time you get the award, you have a great framework in place. So in terms of when to actually, why people are intimidated by government grants, that's because I think everything having to do with the government can be intimidating. They think bureaucracy, they think hard. It doesn't have to be hard. As a matter of fact, the last 2 years have been a fabulous time to actually go after government grants because of the amount of funding that has been sort of released into the space. You guys have all probably heard of the American Rescue Plan Act. That released billions of dollars to every time I tell people this is so shocking, every single city government, every single county government, every territorial government, every tribal government that was eligible received funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. There's other agencies, there's other American Rescue Plan Act funding, but so what does that mean? Government agencies aren't the agencies that are doing the work. In order for them to do work and serve their communities, they need to partner with nonprofit organizations and other community-based organizations. So if a local government gets $95 million, for example, or a city government receives $47 million, they're not going to hire up the staff to do the work. They have to partner with organizations that already have the capacity to do the work. So I only mention that because that was a lot of funding that went to every eligible government entity. Also, I forgot to mention state governments receive that funding too. And so, that was one way that a lot of organizations started receiving government grants for the very, very, very first time. Now you may say, okay, well, that money came from the Department of Treasury. Yes, it is federal funding that is basically passed, from the Department of Treasury to the local government. And then you as a nonprofit apply to the local government for that grant, or you as a nonprofit apply to the state government for that grant, but the source is still federal. But again, I brought that up because the application processes were very simple in many cases. And so a lot of the bureaucracy that you anticipate with government grants just wasn't in place, because the idea was to get the funding to organizations that can have that impact immediately. It's a COVID relief bill. So you don't want to make it hard for organizations that are serving, folks to be able to access the funding. So that's a very long answer to why folks are intimidated. It's because of the previous history of them being a little bit more, laborious, and they can be, but you won't know until you try. And so I don't think one should be intimidated. You should give it a try and hire help. Grants Works, that's what we do, is we help organizations apply for, government grants that they may not have the capacity to do in-house.
Awesome. So who would you say make a perfect client for you? Like you say, okay, you're perfect. We can go ahead and apply for that grant and you're going to get it most likely.
So a perfect client is typically, it's going to be an organization that has, at least 5 years of experience. They have staff that can actually, serve as the program manager and make sure that the program is implemented. They have, at least one or two people on their finance team to manage the grant budget, because once you get the grant, and this is what Nora was saying, when you get your 501c3 and you're running out to get a grant, remember, getting the grant is just the first step, right? Managing the grant is different. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be hard, but you have to manage it or you'll lose it.
Yes. A lot of people don't realize, like, you don't
Yes.
get just the money and they say bye. They give you money even in installments. So if you pass, then okay, here's the next step.
Exactly. And some of them, and this is something to note, some of the grants, especially government grants, they are cost reimbursement grants. So what does that mean? That means that you spend the money, let's say we're currently in the month of October, you spend all the money that you need to run the program in October. At the end of October, early November, you seek reimbursement from the government entity. So it's a cost reimbursement grant. You put up the capital, you get reimbursed almost immediately, but you still have to have that capital to keep that program running. So it's typically, an organization that has a good amount of experience, has, at least people on the team to manage the program and the financial aspect of it. And an organization that appreciates the need, it appreciates what it takes to, apply and manage that grant. So yeah, that would be it.
Awesome. So yeah, does the organization has to be US based organization or what?
No, it doesn't have to be a US based organization. Great question. So when it comes to government grants, especially federal grants, I'm not so sure about on the local and state side. Foreign entities can apply for certain grant funding opportunities. So when the federal government announces a grant funding opportunity, it could be called a notice of funding opportunity, it could be called a request for application, it could be called a funding opportunity announcement. I'm giving you guys all of that just because you may go to a particular agency site and see it's called one thing, go to another site and see it's called something else, and you're like, well, what is the difference? It's the same thing. But when they announce these funding opportunity announcements, they they almost always list the eligible entity, basically the organizations that can apply for the funding. And in some instances, it can be a foreign entity, especially if it's work that's being done in a different part of the world. Some foreign entities can apply for funding.
And how would people know about the funding opportunities and when they should apply for, and what should they be looking for? Like, how would they know?
Great question. So one thing that you can do is you can go to grants.gov. That's for the federal funding opportunities. So grants.gov is where you're going to go for most, not all federal funding opportunities. Now, if for whatever reason, let's say your organization operates in the workforce development space, I would certainly find out what grant funding opportunities are announced on, for example, the Department of Labor's website. If you work in education, I would go to the U.S. Department of Education's website. Most of them, not all, will also announce or publish the announcement on grants.gov. And so, that's the first step. Grants.gov, you can actually do a search by agency, you can do a search by keyword, and different variables you can actually do a search on. But as I said, definitely go to that agency that is aligned with the work that you do. That's on the federal side. On the state and local government side, you would definitely go to the agency that does work, again, in your space. So for example, if you work in environmental health, right, you would go to your agency's let's say your state agency's Office of Environmental health, or no, or maybe environmental, whatever that agency would be called. It could even be the Department of Public Health that has an environmental health division. But again, always go to the state or local government's aligned entity, and you can find grant announcements there. I also actually do training on this. I actually have a training where it's called Your Shortcut to Government Grants, and it's local, state, and federal. It just basically explains all of this and with examples and all of that, so folks can see it.
Awesome. That is great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And we were to anything first about the government grant before we move to another thing.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on government grants? You know, the only other thing I would say is applying to government grants can be challenging for everyone, even people that have a lot of experience. So what you feel isn't unique. Don't beat up on yourself if it seems, you know, overwhelming. You can, you know, apply for it if you decide to move forward, but just remember to take it one step at a time. Read through the solicitation. I read through the solicitations or the funding announcements multiple times to make sure I don't miss any details. So it's not easy for anyone. Give yourself grace and definitely give it a try. If you're not ready for federal, try local or state. If you're not ready for government as a primary recipient, definitely try your hand at being a sub-recipient.
Awesome. And for sub-recipients, do you think they should have the same requirement, like 2-3 years in experience, have the same capacity? Do you think that applies to them as well?
That's a great, yeah, I definitely think that applies because, and I'm glad you clarified that. We don't want people to think because they now have a 501c3 that they can go out and try to be a sub-recipient. No, in any instance, you want to have at least 2 to 3 years of experience, of outcomes, of success, of, you know, data that you can point to saying that my organization has done this work in this community or those communities. Here are the people that we served over the 2-year period, because that, you know, it's almost like lending. You don't, you know, most banks aren't going to lend funds, and this is not a loan. Grants are not loans, but I'm just giving you an example. Banks aren't going to lend money to a person with no, you know, no assets, no capital, nothing, right? They want to see what you bring to the table before they say, yes, we trust you with the loan. Again, grants are not loans, but I just want to make sure that everyone sees it, you know, understands that. Using that example, probably not the best example, but
oh no, I give the same example actually when I talk to people. I said, okay, imagine if you are going to buy a home, they always ask you for 2 years of tax return, right? They do ask for that. That's why, like, I always discourage people from filing the 990 and card because it has no information. Like, you want to show information. I would recommend always to go for the long one because it gives, like, you know, a real picture, transparency and everything. If not, okay, at least do the easy, but I do recommend the long one. I think this example of the loan or buying a house, like, it's closer to people because they do it all the time. So you just want them to, you know, like, just think about it this way, because a lot of people I've seen, like I said, like, they just go, they go after getting the 501c3, trying to waste their time, actually, and effort and money sometimes, just trying to win grants that they have no a chance of getting. So hopefully people will understand now, like, they will see, like, you an expert to understand this is really, like, they have to get themselves ready, and like you said, they have to have the money to do the thing that they said they're gonna do, because this is a reimbursement grant at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I was making some notes, if I can add, if you don't mind me adding. I always tell people in my various social places that a grant is just one tool in your toolbox of funding sources. Your funding sources should include, over time, you may not be ready on day one, individual donations, corporate donations, sponsorships, maybe a membership, maybe your organization has a curriculum, and maybe you want to sell the curriculum and use the income to support, you know, the programming. So there are different ways you can bring in you know, revenue for your organization, and a grant should just be a part of that overall strategy, but not the strategy. especially if you're new, it's going to be very challenging to get a grant, if not impossible, when you first get your 501c3.
Yes. And to add to that, actually, like if you guys decided to sell anything, you want to make sure it's related income, and also you want to make sure you file 990T in addition to the regular 990, because this is most likely a taxable income. And yeah, so a lot of people I've seen, like they try to sell and they don't really know, like they have to file, they have to pay taxes, thinking like nonprofits as tax exempt no matter what. So please, guys, pay attention to that. And if you are selling anything, yes, it's fine, but you want to make sure like it's not too much unrelated, so you can keep your exempt status. And another thing, you want to make sure you file the correct form and to see if you are if you have to pay taxes or not. Thank you so much for that. So I want to take you to businesses. So you do grant for businesses. A lot of people, they think, okay, grants is only for nonprofits, and if I'm a business, I have to go get loan from SBA or from the bank or whatever. But a lot of people don't think about grants.
Yeah. So yeah, businesses, that's a great question. So businesses can apply for grants. They're very specific areas, however. So on the federal side, I always start at the federal. There are grants for businesses. Specifically, what I'm going to mention is an example of one, but it's not the only type. What we call Small Business Innovation Research Grants, SBIR grants. It also has its sister program, STTR. And that is when the federal government funds businesses' innovation. So for example, if you're a medical research company, an actual for-profit, and your company created some great technology or innovation that helps with something along in the medical research space, you can apply to the federal government for funding to help you, determine, how, is it ready for market, and what steps you would need to take to get it market ready, so to speak. And that's because the federal government views it still as a public good. The federal government, the grants are not necessarily for you to get startup costs for you to, start your business and keep it moving. It really is to serve a public good, so to speak. So I was just giving you an example of how that's viewed for profits. There are also grants for profits from foundations, but are again very limited. Those are typically for profits that have a sort of a social angle, like a social good. They're actually seen by the for profits as social investment. So, say for example, what's the name of the company that makes shoes that when you buy the shoes, they make a pair for children in other parts of the world? Is it Tom's or? I don't remember the name of the company, but that's an example of a company that they are for profit, but they use their profits to do other great things in the world. And so a company like that could actually get funded by a foundation who actually funds for profits. Not very few foundations fund for profits, by the way. But if they do, it's because that company has a sort of a social element or a social good to the work that they're doing. And there are other, grants for businesses. They're typically called fellowships or prizes or something like that. And they're typically for very specific reasons, not just to get startup costs and, however, I'm glad, this is actually a great point. There are now a number of organizations that I'm aware of, like Hello Alice, and quite a few organizations that, Comcast even had grants for businesses. A lot of organizations over the last 2 or 3 years developed grant programs, or, so that they can award grants to primarily, communities that have been under-resourced historically, or what they called capacity constrained communities or constrained capacities. I don't remember. So yeah, there are grants out there for businesses, but again, for very specific areas.
Do you also help businesses get grants, or only?
I do.
Okay.
I do actually, I do help businesses get grants as well. I'm trying to think of one of my clients that I helped get a grant. Oh yeah, I have a client that was a business that does grants, and she received, that organization received a grant. It was actually a fellowship, a really prominent and important fellowship. So it's a fellowship for that business leader to participate sort of like in a cohort program. So they get both money and they also get to participate in this cohort program over a 1-year period. It's a 6-figure grant. So it's not, it's not small amount of money. It's a big amount, a good amount of money. And yes, so we do help them. And of course, businesses that are interested in seeking SBIR funding, what I described earlier, they reach out to us as well, either to help them apply for the SBIR grant, and certainly to manage it after they get it, because that's, again, another thing that they have to make sure that they do.
Awesome. That is great. And also you mentioned when we spoke previously about Inflation Reduction Act's available funding. So would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yes. So I'm going to, I'm going to start with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which, the proper name is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, only because a lot of people think it's just infrastructure. There are 350 programs that are going to be funded from that bipartisan infrastructure law, and a good percentage of that are going to be grant programs for energy efficiency, renewable energy, electric vehicle infrastructure development, because, in order for us to really expand the amount of electric vehicles on the road, we need more of the infrastructure so we can actually charge it. Even mining cleanup. There are areas around the country where they have a lot of mining wastes, lead pipe replacement. I mean, it's billions of dollars that's going to flow from that. That's been authorized by that law. Then you have the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed, and that was just signed by the current administration in August. And that also has billions. They call it the largest investment in climate resilience in US history. Now, you wouldn't know that because the name of the bill is Inflation Reduction Act. My opinion is that that name is intentional. To be able to get people to sign off on it in Congress, you give it a nice name, like who can have an issue with inflation reduction. So you call a law inflation reduction, when in fact a good amount of it is climate resilience and climate change, funding to address climate change in the US. So there's billions of dollars in funding in that as well. I actually haven't had a chance to write. I typically write really detailed blog posts to help me understand some of these laws. Haven't written it yet, but I did have to do some initial reviews for one of my clients.
Awesome. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
these laws that we hear about. There's typically funding attached to it. So
awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Great information. What else you can people should be aware of, and you think they should really learn or reach out to you for more information?
So there are a couple of things, 2 points I want to make in generally, that nonprofit organizations, new, emerging, established, it's really important that you form collaborative partnerships with other nonprofits in your community. If not in your community, in your region, whatever the case may be. The idea is that when you apply for a grant makers, whether it's government or on the private sector, they want to see that you have relationships that you can leverage to expand the impact of the funding. So if they give you a $200,000 grant, do you have partnerships with other nonprofits in your community, or it could be schools in your community, it could be community college in your community, that would actually make that $200,000 investment, grant, not investment grant, but that $200 grant really do the work of maybe $230,000 in impact, because you've been able to leverage those relationships. So I do want to that's really, really, really important that, when you get your 501c3, don't go out and try to conquer the world by yourself. Partner up with other organizations with more experience, because you learn from them, but also it's great for when you're ready to seek grant funding or other resources. The other point I want to make is that get those collaborations in writing, because some grants, whether on the private sector or on the public side, public sector being governments, they sometimes want copies of your written MOUs, your written collaboration letters. So it's good to, have an MOU in writing. You don't have to do it immediately. Give yourself time to form those relationships and then get written MOUs, get them signed, and just save them. So, you never know, a grant opportunity may come up and they want a copy of that. So it's good to have that. It's just good to have in general, because that way you guys are both clear on who's going to do what. Now, I do want to talk about briefly being government grant ready, because, I get a lot of questions about what it takes to become grant ready. We actually have a course called Let's Get Grant Ready, where we really have folks think through the 3 overarching things they need to be thinking about to be grant ready. And that's the state of their organization, the state of their financial management system, and the state of how they manage programs. And so those are the 3 umbrellas, or the 3 pockets of things that one would need to take a close look at to be, to work towards being grant ready. I do want to also say, as I've said before, give yourself grace. You may not be grant ready today. You may not be grant ready next month. Give yourself time, 3 months, 6 months, even 6 months is probably more realistic, to work on those things that it takes to become grant ready. And then, start seeking grants if you have the 2 to 3 years of experience that Nora and I mentioned. Being government grant ready is going to require a lot of support from folks like Nora. A lot of it is going to be around the kind of financial management systems you have in place, the policies and procedures you have in place. Because remember, public funding, government grant funding is taxpayer dollars. And that's another reason why government grants seem to be a little bit more tedious, because the government agencies have to show that they are protecting taxpayer dollars by checking off all the boxes, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's. So that's a long, tip or set of tips, but it's really important. The Noras of the world are really important. Your programs are important. The impact you make in the community is important. But if your financial management system is lacking, that will impact your ability to get grants sometimes. So, because some of them want to see your organizational budget. You need a Nora to help you develop your budget.
Definitely. That's what I tell my client. Like, you have to have your donor management system. You have to reach out to those donors so you can build your capacity. You can hire a team. Then you can go and talk to someone who helps you with a grant, like yourself, and get ready really to get grants, and make sure you can manage it and you have the capacity, because you don't want to get in trouble. You want to get, you don't want this money, you don't want yourself to lose this money. If you're successful in the first grant, probably, well, I'll leave you answer this, like, maybe I don't want to be wrong. So if they were successfully getting grants, manage it, reporting, would that increase their chances to getting another grant? Would that give them priority?
Yes, it does, because it's just like a resume, your grant history. Just so you know, guys, a lot of these foundation and government entities, they want to see your what they call prior funding experience. Like, so you want to keep a running list of all the grants you receive, a $1,500 grant for the tiny ones, or maybe your $1.5 million grants, keep a running list of all the grants that you receive, and what agency or foundation you received it from, because that is important. It's like building your resume. Another thing to consider too is, if you're going to ever apply for government grants, you might as well do this now, or it doesn't have to be now, but soon. You want to go ahead and register in sam.gov, so that if there is a local government grant opportunity that you hear about that's a really good fit for maybe you and another partner, you can apply. You're going to need to be registered in sam.gov to get a local government grant or state government grant, anything to do with the government. You need to be registered in sam.gov, sam.gov. And you do not need to pay somebody to do it for you. You can spend the 45 minutes to sit down, if you can, and do it, or pay someone on your team, someone on your team to do it. I also want to let you guys know about Grants Works Academy. Quite a bit of training on there on federal grants, being grant ready, not just federal grants, just, a good amount of training on there. I do have a federal grants simplified boot camp That's our most popular class, and we start that again tomorrow. And that includes both, training and Q&As with me every week. And so you leave there completely, completely confident in what federal grants are, and just help you. You're no longer going to be sort of like in the dark about what federal grants are, because we really help you uncover all of that. And it's a great course, and it's fun because, again, there's that weekly live Q&A with me, and we go over a number of things. So it's a fun class, even though it's about federal grants. People think it's not fun. I make it fun.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, definitely, guys. If you're ready to think to get grants, like Patrice said, like 2 to 3 years, and you really have programs, have record keeping, have everything, go ahead and register for the class, and let's get you grant ready, federal grant ready, right? So yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And guys, if you are not there yet, I have a mastermind, a nonprofit mastermind starting in October. We'll be announcing the date very soon, and that's going to start in October. And it's a very great deal right now because we're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to teach you how to build your capacity, get donations from your donor, how to keep your records, how to make sure you are ready to get grant ready. So you can get to the point where you can register for Patrice classes, and also maybe like go and get grants through her. So make sure you register. We're gonna put the link down in the comments. So we're gonna put the links to get to reach out Patrice, and also to register for the mastermind. So see where are you at, and see what fits for you right now at the moment, and let's get you started and build your impact, and create the bigger impact around the world. And like Patrice said, you don't have to be US based organization. Even for those international organization, if you're doing creating impact and doing great work, you can also register and get the benefits and learn and help the governments to reach more people and to help the people that you want to help. What else, Patrice? We still have time. We can talk more. What do you think people should know?
One of the things, what else? There's so much. I do still want to address this whole topic around people not liking, being intimidated by federal grants or by government grants in general. I've heard that a number of times, even from, larger organizations, because they, again, the perceived difficulty. I do want to just encourage you to understand, I just want to make sure everyone understands that when you get a government grant, it could be a multi-year grant, right? So that's one thing to consider. It could be a 2 or 3 year grant. Let's say it's a $500,000 grant total over 2 years. That's about $250,000 in year 1. You do a great job, you get the additional $250,000 in year 2. When you get a government grant, local, state, or federal, it adds to your credibility. It's great to be able to say funded by so-and-so local government, put it on your website, because when you apply to foundations or other government entities, they see, oh, they've received government funding in the past, so maybe we can trust them with our funding. So it does add credibility. And like I said, number 3, give yourself grace. There is just give yourself grace to apply for a federal grant. I always say you don't, try to accomplish or do the whole stair at one time. You just want to do it one step at a time. And, just know that there are large organizations that hire people like me to apply for grants because they realize the importance of getting those grants. They may not have the capacity in-house to apply. They don't have maybe staff in-house to apply for the grants, but they understand the importance of getting their hands on the government funding because of the ability to renew, or because they tend to be bigger. They tend to be much larger than private sector grants. So just something to consider.
Awesome. So I got a question actually. Do people have to have a different bank account when they get the grants, or can they keep it in another in the other bank account they have?
That's a great question. So the federal government does, and I'm sure local and state as well, does require that you have your, the only requirement that I've seen is that you have it in an interest-bearing account. Interestingly, because if you get above a certain amount in that interest, you need to mail the money back to the government. It's typically $500. But that takes a while to get to that point, considering interest rates. But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. Number one. And number two, there are some instances, for example, I'm aware of an organization that was, let's say they were being monitored by a federal agency, and they were required to deposit the funds into a separate account so that the government was able to track all of the in and outs of the funds from that account. But that is not typically the case. You want to be able to manage your grant via the financial management system. So you can have all of your funds going to one bank account, but your financial management system, which Nora can help you develop, should be able to separate all of the expenses being charged to that particular grant. So this is where it gets kind of, I'm going to try to make this part fun. So when you get, let's say 5 grants, one, and they're from one is from 3 different counties, one is from the federal government, and one, let's say, is a private sector, from some foundation, and you have all your money going into one bank account. Some of those grants, almost all of those grants are going to say, we will only fund this program or this initiative or whatever. You need to be able to have a financial management system or an expert like Nora who can make sure that only those expenses that this grant said that they would cover would actually be charged to that grant. So you need to be tracking all of your income, your 5 different grants by, 5 different codes. Those are called general ledger codes. And then also making sure you're charging all of those expenses, based on what the grant said they will charge, that are allowed expenses. I don't know if I, I know I explained it, but I don't want to be overly boring, but that is important. Make sure that you have a financial management system that can separate revenue and expenses by source. That's it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for this information. And guys, this is one of the requirements also for nonprofits, for the 501c3 approved organization. You have to separate the reporting for your grants, for your programs. So you have to track how much money you are spending in each program, and you have to keep track of that. So actually, it requires a lot more and accounting and bookkeeping for nonprofit than just the business. People think, oh, we're nonprofit, we should have everything for free. But guys, in order to stay in compliance, you have to spend a lot of money. Who's going to give you their time? Everyone has to feed their family, right? If you don't really have the capacity to pay for experts like Patrice, to help you get grants ready, and for myself and other people who can help you be financially ready also and stay in compliance, you're not gonna last with this organization so much. You have to expect that you are being professionals who knows what they're doing, and also you hire staff who knows what they're doing, because the last thing you want to do is getting a grant and then losing it because you cannot report it correctly, or not file a good tax, 990s, and get pay $20 minimum a day. This is for smaller organization. For larger organization, the amount will be bigger. I see a lot of people use just volunteers who don't know so much, and they will never get into the level where they can seek grants, let alone government grants. You want to be successful, you want to really build your organization correctly, you want to invest money, you have to realize this is money you invest because it has a return in investment. It's not just expenses that you will never see again. It is the money you invest, it's gonna give you more money. It's gonna give these people like you, who are you trying to serve, more opportunity. You can serve more people, you can serve them better. I hear a lot of people saying, okay, if I want to pay this for an accountant or a grant writer or a marketing consultant, then I would rather give food for these people. Well, no, this is not how you should think if you really want to create the impact, because in order to feed more people, if that's your mission, then you really have to invest money and invest in people and in yourself, like
Yeah.
to make sure you can build your capacity so you can access more money, so you can create a bigger impact. So you have to think this way in order to be successful, just like a business. I was in a conference like a few months ago, and someone was talking about, there was a nonprofit accounting conference, and the speaker was saying, people have to understand that nonprofits is really a business, IRS code for a business.
Yeah.
It is a business. Yes, you're doing good in this business, but also you are doing, like you said earlier, Patrice, like you're doing something that a government should have done, but they don't want to hire more people. So they will give you this break of, being tax exempt. So people like can get, like tax break also, and also using this taxpayer money. So you can do the job that governments otherwise have to do. So you have to be in more compliance. There's a separate section on the irs.gov just only for charitable organization. It's huge. So people you have to invest money, you have to learn, spend on your education, hire professional people. If you think you are ready to get government grants, like if you've been here like since the start, or you're just listening on the replay and you heard what Reese said, if you are ready, then go ahead and register for her class and get yourself educated so you know how to apply and do it correctly. And if you think you should hire Patrice and her team to help you get and manage the grant, go ahead and do that. Also, like if you are still not ready, come on and register for my class to get you grant ready. If you don't want to register for that, at least like hire an accountant, even if it wasn't me and my team, like anyone who you are comfortable with, and they know nonprofits, because nonprofits require more compliance. So make sure you do that. Make sure we're gonna put actually we already did put the links for Patrice's class and for my class, and you can actually click on that, and we're gonna put Patrice information so you can reach out to her via email, and we'll do it after we save that this live. And let us know, guys, like if you have any question, even in the replay, so we can we'll get those questions to Patrice if it's for her. And do you mind if people like have more questions, Patrice, like to come again and we talk more? Okay.
No, not at all. Absolutely. I think this is great. It's my mission to help people not feel as intimidated by federal grants. If I learned it, my background is in marketing, guys. And then I made a career transition many years ago, and I learned it. And thankfully I earned that, I now have the expertise, but it is not, it's something that anyone can, take the time to learn. And so that's part of my mission.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, like actually we didn't talk about like, how did you get into government grants?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So really my career, as I said, I started out in advertising and in marketing. I used to be a marketing manager for large organizations and small organizations. And I'm a mom of 3. And so when my son was going into middle school, I decided rather than work full time, I'd rather just kind of shift my career down a little and started working at a nonprofit, because back then there were very, very, very few part-time positions in marketing. And so the only part-time that was available was a nonprofit. That nonprofit organization executive director was they had the vision to understand that if we have $5 million in HUD grants coming to us, we need to have somebody managing it. So they hired me as a part-time grant manager. There was another part-time grant manager there before, but just know that people who understand the importance of this funding are going to put the resources toward that, right? And that's what Nora was saying. understand that in order for you to increase your capacity to be able to serve more, you've got to also invest in those areas where you know that you can that you'll be able to serve more, because you now have a team that can help you guys grow. So yeah, and that's how I started working in nonprofit. I worked at Jerusalem House, which is a nonprofit that provides housing for men and women with HIV/AIDS, and they're homeless men and women who have HIV/AIDS. I also worked at the Carter Center as a grant compliance officer. That's the Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter. I also worked at CDC. I forgot about all this. As a public health analyst, I was an actual federal employee. I stayed in the federal government for 2 years. And then after that, I also was the Senior Director of Federal Grants, Programs, and Performance for Boys and Girls Clubs of America, the headquarters. And I was also a Research Program Manager for Georgia Tech. So all those areas are why I learned everything I've learned over the years about government grants.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great journey.
Yeah, I know.
See, guys, a lot of experience here. So don't miss her class if you think you're ready, like she said. But don't miss her class. Any final words would you like to say to people before we leave?
No, not at all. Just, you know, you can follow me at GrantsWorks on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, GrantsWorks. You can also follow my class, Federal Grants Simplified, on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. And that's our most popular class. And of course, grantsworks.com, which is our regular member website, and grantsworksacademy.com. That's where all of the classes are if you want to go ahead and register today. They're all on demand.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrice. Thank you for being here. Thank you for talking to people and educating them about government grants, and hopefully they understand now more about like what can they expect and when they should expect that and how they should get ready and really work so they can have access to all this money. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Yeah. And guys, make sure you subscribe, follow Patrice. We're gonna put all the information down below in the description so you can have all the links in there. So don't worry if you couldn't write the link. If you're here in the replay, put your question below and we'll make sure to answer any questions you might have. Also, I want to encourage you, if you are not there yet, like to apply for grants and you're just new, or you've been there like for 2 years, but you haven't been successful getting grants, so you are not able to do much. Also, I have my mastermind for nonprofits. Like, go ahead and register for that. We're gonna start soon in October, and this is a very special deal for now, just because it's the end of the year. I want you to reach the holiday season where you can hopefully get a lot of funding from people when they are in mode for donations. So make sure you get there so you can file your taxes and be a step closer, so you can get to Patrice if you're not there yet, so she can help you get in those money from the grants.